January 26, 1945. Holtzwihr, France. Second Lieutenant Audie Murphy stands alone in a frozen field. Behind him, his company, dug into defensive positions. In front of him, 250 German soldiers and 6 Panzer tanks advancing through the snow. Murphy is 20 years old. He weighs 112 pounds. He's 5 feet 5 inches tall. He looks like a kid. The Germans think this will be easy. They're wrong. 2 American tank destroyers have just been hit. One is on fire, flames shooting 30 feet into the air, ammunition cooking off, diesel fuel burning so hot the metal is melting. Everyone knows that vehicle is about to explode. Murphy does something that will later be called the most insane act of courage in American military history. He climbs onto the burning tank destroyer. He grabs the .50 caliber machine gun mounted on top, and for the next hour, while the vehicle burns beneath him, while German bullets tear through the air around him, while the tank literally explodes under his feet, Audie Murphy holds off an entire German battalion. Alone. The Germans call it impossible. Murphy's own men call it suicidal. Military historians will later call it the single greatest display of combat courage in World War II. This is the story of Audie Murphy, the most decorated American soldier of World War II, the man who proved that heroes don't look like what you expect, and the insane last stand that saved 40 American lives and stopped a German offensive that could have changed the course of the war.
Let me take you back to 1925, Hunt County, Texas. Sharecropper country. Audie Murphy was born into a family so poor that poor doesn't really capture it. We're talking about dirt floors, no running water, meals that consisted of whatever you could hunt or grow, sometimes no meals at all. Audie was the 7th of 12 children. His father abandoned the family when Audie was young. His mother died when he was 16. Suddenly, Audie, barely more than a child himself, was responsible for keeping his younger siblings alive. He dropped out of school after 5th grade. He picked cotton for 50 cents a day. He hunted rabbits and squirrels to feed his brothers and sisters. He became an extraordinarily good shot out of necessity. Ammunition was expensive, so every shot had to count. There was nothing about Audie Murphy that suggested war hero. He was small, skinny, baby-faced. He looked younger than he was. He was quiet, polite, almost painfully shy. When World War II started, Audie tried to enlist. He was 17 years old. The Marines rejected him, too short. The paratroopers rejected him, too light. They were worried a strong wind would blow him off course during a jump. Finally, the Army accepted him, barely. They almost rejected him too, but they were getting desperate for soldiers in 1942. So they took this 1,112-pound kid from Texas who looked like he should still be in high school. Audie's sister gave him a photo of herself as he left for training. On the back, she'd written, "Don't worry, the war will be over before you get there." She was spectacularly wrong. Audie arrived in North Africa in February 1943. He was assigned to Company B, 15th Infantry Regiment, 3rd Infantry Division. His first combat experience was the invasion of Sicily. Most soldiers need time to adjust to combat, to learn how to function under fire, to overcome the natural human instinct to hide when people are shooting at you. Audie didn't need adjustment time. His first combat action, Sicily, July 1943, he killed 2 Italian officers who were trying to escape on horseback, at 300 yards with a rifle while under fire. It was the kind of shot that experienced soldiers would struggle with. Audie made it look easy. His commanding officer noticed immediately. This quiet kid from Texas was different. He didn't panic, didn't hesitate. In combat, while everyone else was trying not to die, Audie was hunking. By the time his unit fought through Sicily and into Italy, Audie had earned a reputation. He volunteered for the most dangerous missions. He'd go on night patrols alone. He could move through enemy territory without making a sound. Skills he'd learned hunting in Texas translated perfectly to combat. At Anzio, one of the bloodiest battles in the Italian campaign, Audie single-handedly held a position for an hour against German attack, allowing his company to reorganize. He earned his first major decoration, the Bronze Star. Then came southern France, August 1944. The Allied invasion of southern France. Audie's unit was among the first to land. In the fighting that followed, Audie killed or captured dozens of German soldiers. His superiors promoted him to sergeant, then staff sergeant, then second lieutenant. By January 1945, Audie Murphy was 20 years old and already one of the most decorated soldiers in the U.S. Army. He had the Distinguished Service Cross, 2 Silver Stars, 3 Purple Hearts, and a chest full of other medals. But he wasn't done, not even close. Because on January 26, 1945, Audie Murphy would do something so extraordinary that it would define not just his legacy, but the very concept of military heroism for generations to come.
January 1945, eastern France near the town of Holtzwihr. The weather was brutal. Temperatures below freezing, snow covering everything, visibility limited. The kind of conditions where just staying alive was an accomplishment. The 3rd Infantry Division had been fighting almost continuously since landing in southern France 5 months earlier. They were exhausted, understrength. Company B, Murphy's company, had started the war with 235 men. By January 1945, they were down to 40 combat-effective soldiers. 40 men to hold a section of the front line against a German army that was getting desperate. See, this was after the Battle of the Bulge. The Germans had thrown everything they had into one last massive offensive in Belgium, and it had failed. Now they were trying smaller offensives all along the front, hoping to slow the Allied advance into Germany. The area around Holtzwihr was strategically important. There was a forest, the Bois de Riedweiler, that the Germans needed to control. If they could take that forest, they could threaten the entire American supply line. Company B was positioned at the edge of that forest. Murphy and his men had dug defensive positions in the frozen ground, foxholes, communication trenches, machine gun nests. It wasn't much, but it would have to do. On January 25th, the day before our story, Murphy received intelligence reports. German forces were massing for an attack. Infantry supported by armor, probably coming the next morning. Murphy requested reinforcements. He was told there were none available. He requested artillery support. He was told it was limited. Other sectors had priority. So Murphy prepared his 40 men as best he could. He positioned machine guns to cover the approaches. He made sure everyone had extra ammunition. He walked the defensive line, talking to each soldier, making sure they knew what to expect. "We're going to be hit hard tomorrow," he told them. "Stay in your positions. Conserve your ammunition. And whatever happens, don't break." That night, Murphy didn't sleep. He stood watch, scanning the dark forest, listening for any sign of German movement. At dawn on January 26th, the Germans came. Not subtly, not with reconnaissance or probing attacks, they came in force. 250 infantry soldiers, 6 Panzer IV and Panther tanks, supported by mortars and artillery. The Americans opened fire immediately, machine guns, rifles, everything they had. The Germans kept coming. 2 M10 tank destroyers, American armored vehicles with powerful guns, had been attached to Company B for support. They were positioned about 50 meters in front of Murphy's main defensive line. The plan was for them to engage the German tanks while the infantry dealt with the German soldiers. The plan lasted about 5 minutes. A German tank round hit the first M10. The crew bailed out immediately, running back toward American lines.
The vehicle started smoking. The second M10 fired 3 shots, then took a direct hit from a German Panther. The crew evacuated. Within seconds, the M10 was on fire. Flames shot up from the engine compartment. Ammunition started cooking off, small explosions as shells detonated from the heat. Murphy watched from his foxhole as both tank destroyers were knocked out. Now there was nothing between his 40 men and 6 German tanks. The German infantry was advancing behind the tanks, using them as cover. Standard tactics: let the armor break the defensive line, then follow with infantry to clear out any survivors. Murphy grabbed his radio and called for artillery support. The response wasn't encouraging. "We can give you some fire, but it's going to take time to coordinate." Murphy looked at his company. He could see the fear in their faces. They were good soldiers, but they were outnumbered 6-1. They had no anti-tank weapons that could stop those Panthers. If the Germans kept advancing, Company B would be overrun in minutes. Murphy made a decision. He ordered his company to fall back to a secondary defensive position in the woods about 200 meters behind their current location. It was the smart tactical choice. Give up ground, but keep your men alive to fight another day. His men started withdrawing, moving carefully, providing covering fire for each other, exactly as they'd been trained. But Murphy didn't go with them. He ran forward, toward the burning M10 tank destroyer, the one that was on fire, the one that everyone knew was going to explode any second. His men shouted at him to come back. Murphy ignored them. He climbed onto the burning tank destroyer.
Picture this: a tank destroyer on fire, diesel fuel burning at over 1,000 degrees, metal so hot you can't touch it without your skin blistering, ammunition exploding inside the vehicle. The entire thing could catastrophically detonate at any moment. And Audie Murphy climbs on top of it. Why? Because mounted on top of that burning death trap was a .50 caliber machine gun, and that machine gun was loaded. Murphy grabbed the gun's handles that were probably hot enough to cause burns, but he grabbed them anyway. He swung the weapon toward the advancing Germans, and he opened fire. The .50 caliber is not a subtle weapon. It fires rounds the size of your finger at a rate of 500 per minute. Each bullet carries enough energy to punch through light armor. When it hits a human being, the result is catastrophic. Murphy started shooting. The German infantry, which had been advancing confidently behind their tanks, suddenly found themselves under accurate, devastating fire. Men dropped, others dove for cover. The advance stalled. The German commanders couldn't believe what they were seeing. One American, on a burning vehicle, holding off their entire attack. They ordered their men to concentrate fire on Murphy. Hundreds of rifles and machine guns turned toward that burning M110. Bullets tore through the air around him. They hit the tank destroyer. They ricocheted off the metal. Some passed so close to Murphy's head that he could feel the shockwave. Murphy kept firing. He was completely exposed, standing on top of a vehicle, silhouetted against the flames and smoke. He should have been killed in the first 30 seconds. But Murphy had learned something in 2 years of combat. Movement is what gets you killed. The human eye is attracted to movement. So Murphy stood perfectly still except for his arms working the machine gun. He became part of the burning wreckage, and somehow, impossibly, the bullets missed. The Germans sent their tanks forward to destroy him. Murphy shifted fire to the tank commanders, the officers standing in the turret hatches directing their crews. He killed 2 of them. The other tank commanders ducked inside their vehicles, closing their hatches. With their vision limited, the tanks became less effective. For 20 minutes, Murphy held the Germans by himself. Then his field telephone rang. Yes, he had a phone. He'd grabbed it before climbing onto the tank destroyer. The wire stretched from his defensive line to where he was standing. While he was firing the machine gun with one hand, he used his other hand to answer the phone. It was his artillery liaison officer. "Murphy, I've got fire support coordinated. Where do you want it?" Murphy, still shooting, gave coordinates. "Put it on the tree line. 200 yards to my front." "That's danger close. You're going to be in the blast radius." "I don't care. Do it." The artillery came in. High explosive shells landed exactly where Murphy called them.
German soldiers who'd been advancing through the trees were cut down by shrapnel. The attack faltered again. But the Germans didn't retreat. They'd committed too much to this attack. They regrouped and came again. Murphy kept firing. The .50 caliber was getting hot. Firing continuously generates incredible heat. The barrel was starting to glow. Murphy's hands were burned from touching the hot metal, but he didn't stop. 40 minutes into the fight, a German sniper shot Murphy in the right leg. Murphy barely reacted. He shifted his weight to his other leg and kept firing. Blood soaked through his pants, and he was standing in a spreading pool of his own blood on top of the burning tank destroyer. The pain must have been incredible. Murphy showed no sign of it. The Germans made one final push. They threw everything they had at him. Infantry charging from multiple directions, tanks firing directly at his position, mortars dropping all around him. Murphy called in artillery fire on his own position. He told the artillery officer, "Put it right on top of me." "Murphy, that will kill you." "Do it." The shells came in. They landed so close that Murphy was thrown off his feet by the concussion. Shrapnel hit the tank destroyer. But the German attack broke. The soldiers who hadn't been killed or wounded retreated. The tanks pulled back. After 1 hour, 60 minutes of continuous combat, the German offensive stopped. Murphy had fired over 3,000 rounds. The .50 caliber machine gun was so hot it was warping. The tank destroyer was still burning. Murphy was wounded, burned, and probably in shock. But he was still standing.
When the German attack broke, Murphy finally climbed down from the burning tank destroyer. His leg was bleeding badly. His hands were burned. His ears were ringing from the constant gunfire and explosions. He grabbed his rifle and limped back toward his company's position. His men couldn't believe he was alive. They'd been watching the entire thing, watching their lieutenant stand on a burning vehicle for an hour, alone, holding off an entire battalion. Someone tried to help Murphy sit down. He refused. "Get the company ready," Murphy said. "We're counterattacking." His platoon sergeant stared at him. "Sir, you're wounded. You need a medic." "Get the company ready." Murphy had recognized something that his men, focused on their own survival, hadn't seen. The German attack was broken. Their infantry was disorganized. Their tanks had pulled back. This was the moment to hit them while they were vulnerable. Murphy organized his 40 men into a skirmish line. Despite his wounds, despite having just survived an experience that should have killed him 10 times over, he led the counterattack personally. They moved through the area where the Germans had been attacking. The scene was horrific. Bodies everywhere, destroyed equipment, the ground torn up by artillery and machine gun fire. The Germans, who were still capable of fighting, retreated. They'd had enough. They'd thrown 250 men and 6 tanks at a force of 40 Americans, and they'd been stopped by 1 man on a burning tank. Murphy's company reclaimed their original defensive positions. The threat to the forest and the American supply lines was over. A medic finally caught up to Murphy and forced him to sit down for treatment. The leg wound was serious. A bullet had gone clean through his calf muscle. His hands had second-degree burns. He was suffering from smoke inhalation. He should have been evacuated immediately. Murphy refused evacuation. He stayed with his company until he was certain the position was secure. Only then did he allow himself to be taken to an aid station. The after-action reports were filed. Murphy's commanding officers read them and couldn't quite believe what they were reading. They interviewed witnesses. Every soldier in Company B confirmed the same story. Murphy had single-handedly held off a German battalion for an hour while standing on a burning vehicle. The casualty reports were equally astonishing. Of Murphy's 40-man company, only 4 were wounded, none killed. The Germans had lost over 50 killed and dozens more wounded. All 6 of their tanks had withdrawn. The offensive had completely failed, and it had been stopped by a 20-year-old second lieutenant who weighed 112 pounds. General Alexander Patch, commander of the U.S. 7th Army, personally reviewed the case. "This," he said, "is Medal of Honor material, without question." On June 2, 1945, a month after Germany's surrender, Audie Murphy was presented with the Medal of Honor by General Jacob Devers in a ceremony near Salzburg, Austria. The citation read, in part, "Second Lieutenant Murphy's indomitable courage and his refusal to give an inch of ground saved his company from possible encirclement and destruction and enabled it to hold the woods, which had been the enemy's objective." But that cold, formal language doesn't capture what Murphy actually did. It doesn't capture the insanity of climbing onto a burning vehicle, the impossible courage of standing there for an hour while an entire battalion tried to kill you, the stubborn refusal to die or retreat or show any sign of fear. Murphy was already the most decorated American soldier of World War II before the action at Holtzwihr. After it, he became a legend.
After the war, Audie Murphy came home to a hero's welcome. He was on magazine covers, he gave speeches, everyone wanted to meet the most decorated soldier in American history. By the time the war ended, Murphy had earned Medal of Honor, Distinguished Service Cross, 2 Silver Stars, Legion of Merit, 2 Bronze Stars, 3 Purple Hearts, and decorations from France and Belgium. 33 awards and medals in total, more than any other American soldier in World War II. He was 21 years old. Hollywood came calling. Actor James Cagney saw Murphy's photo on the cover of Life magazine and invited him to California. Murphy had no acting experience, but he had something that couldn't be taught: authenticity. When he played a soldier, he wasn't acting. Murphy starred in over 40 films between 1948 and 1969. His most famous was To Hell and Back, a movie based on his own autobiography in which Murphy played himself. The scene at Holtzwihr is in that movie. Murphy recreated, on camera, the hour he spent on that burning tank destroyer. But success in Hollywood didn't mean Murphy had escaped the war. He suffered from what we now call PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder. In the 1950s, they didn't have a name for it. They just knew that some veterans came home changed, haunted. Murphy had nightmares, terrible nightmares, where he relived combat. He slept with a loaded pistol under his pillow. He had flashbacks. He struggled with depression. In the 1960s, Murphy did something incredibly brave. He talked about it publicly. He became one of the first high-profile veterans to speak openly about PTSD. He testified before Congress, advocating for better mental health support for veterans. "I got the medals," he said in an interview, "but I'm not sure I won anything." That quote reveals something important about Murphy. He never thought of himself as a hero. He thought of himself as a survivor, someone who did what was necessary and somehow didn't die. When people asked him about the hour on the tank destroyer, Murphy's answer was always the same. "I was angry. The Germans were trying to kill my men. I was too angry to be scared." But that doesn't fully explain it, does it? Anger doesn't make you climb onto a burning vehicle. Anger doesn't make you stand perfectly still while hundreds of people are shooting at you. Anger doesn't make you call artillery fire on your own position. What Murphy had was something rarer than courage. He had absolute commitment. When he decided his company wouldn't retreat, when he decided that defensive line would hold, that became reality. The universe had to rearrange itself around Murphy's decision because Murphy simply would not accept any other outcome. Murphy died in a plane crash in 1971. He was 45 years old. He was buried at Arlington National Cemetery with full military honors. His grave is the second most visited site in Arlington after President Kennedy's. Every day, people leave medals at his headstone, challenge coins from military units, flags, notes thanking him for his service. Because Audie Murphy represents something we need to believe in. The idea that heroes are real, that courage exists, that one person in the right moment can make a difference.
Today, the U.S. Army names buildings after Audie Murphy. Fort Hood, Texas, now Fort Cavazos, has the Audie Murphy Club, an organization that honors outstanding non-commissioned officers. Military historians still study the action at Holtzwihr, not because it offers tactical lessons. What Murphy did was so specific to that moment those circumstances, that unique combination of terrain and enemy disposition and available weapons, but because it represents the upper limit of what human beings are capable of under stress. One analysis calculated that Murphy faced incoming fire from approximately 300 weapons during that hour: rifles, machine guns, tank cannons, mortars. The statistical probability of his survival was effectively zero. And yet, there's a theory in combat psychology called stress inoculation. The idea is that exposure to combat stress, in gradually increasing doses, can train someone to function under conditions that would incapacitate most people. Murphy had that. 2 years of combat had taught him to function when others froze. But stress inoculation doesn't explain climbing onto a burning vehicle. It doesn't explain standing there for an hour. It doesn't explain calling artillery fire on your own position. What Murphy did goes beyond training, beyond psychology. It enters the realm of will, pure human will, asserting itself against impossible circumstances. The Germans who survived the battle at Holtzwihr told a story years later. They said they'd seen the American on the burning tank. They'd been ordered to kill him. They'd fired hundreds of rounds at him. They'd been certain he was dead, that he had to be dead, that no one could survive what they were throwing at him. And yet, he kept firing back, like a ghost, like something that couldn't be killed because it had already decided not to die. "We thought he was a demon," one German veteran said in an interview in the 1980s. "We were wrong. He was just a better soldier than we were." Murphy's Medal of Honor citation ends with these words: "Second Lieutenant Murphy's supreme courage and heroism saved the lives of his entire company and enabled his unit to hold its position against seemingly impossible odds." But that formal language misses something essential. Murphy didn't just save his company. He proved something about human potential, about what we're capable of when everything is on the line, about the heights of courage that ordinary people, sharecropper sons from Texas, kids who dropped out of school in 5th grade, can reach when the moment demands it. In 1971, at Murphy's funeral, a general gave the eulogy. He said, "Audie Murphy was the greatest American soldier of World War II. But more importantly, he was a good man who never forgot where he came from and who fought for others his entire life." Murphy's wife, Pamela, said something even simpler. He never thought he was special. He thought he just did his job. Maybe that's the final lesson of Audie Murphy's story. Heroes don't think of themselves as heroes. They think of themselves as people doing what needs to be done. When your men are in danger, you don't calculate odds or weigh risks. You climb onto the burning tank because that's where the gun is. And you stand there for an hour, for however long it takes, because that's the job.
Audie Murphy stood 5 feet 5 inches tall. He weighed 112 pounds. He looked like a kid even after 2 years of combat. The Germans who saw him probably thought he'd be an easy target. They were wrong, because heroes don't look like what you expect. They're not always the biggest or the strongest or the loudest. Sometimes they're quiet kids from Texas who learned to shoot hunting rabbits to feed their siblings, who joined the army because they had nothing else, who discovered, in the most terrible circumstances imaginable, that they had something inside them that couldn't be broken. On January 26, 1945, Audie Murphy proved that one person, one determined, courageous, absolutely committed person, can change the outcome of a battle, can save lives, can do the impossible. All you have to do is climb onto the burning tank. If you want more incredible stories from World War II, let me know in the comments which hero you'd like to hear about next. Like and subscribe for more true stories of courage, sacrifice, and the extraordinary things ordinary people can do when everything is on the line. Remember, heroes are real. Courage exists. And sometimes the impossible is just another challenge waiting for the right person to face it.